Hello, I'm Nate, aka B-Tier Mutineer, and in today's video, I decided to make my most self-indulgent video yet, painstakingly analyzing and rating every single piece of armor in Dragon Age Origins. This includes armor sets, mage robes, and cloth helmets, and armor pieces of all types. It does not include shields because those will be ranked in the weapons video. There are a lot of armor pieces in the game, so I don't know what I was thinking, but nonetheless, here it is. My analysis and scoring of every wearable piece of armor in Dragon Age Origins. Enjoy! Before we get into this frankly insane video, I'd like to take a moment to say a special thank you to my members who help keep this channel running. I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider joining the channel as a member to support me and unlock perks like early access to videos. Joining is very much appreciated, but not required. I am always thankful, even if you just take the time to like the video and maybe leave a comment. Okay, time to get into the nitty-gritty. First and foremost, I'll be rating everything within categories because that's the easiest way to have nice timestamps for you and keep everything organized. I'll be giving each item or armor set a score from 1 to 5, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. However, these scores only hold up within each category. You can't compare basic items with unique ones, or light gloves with heavy ones, so a basic item getting a 5 obviously doesn't compare to a unique item getting a 5. Hopefully that explains the scoring system. If not, I'm sure you'll figure it out as we go. Starting with basic armor sets. These are those armor sets that have a set bonus when all required pieces are equipped, but otherwise none of the individual pieces have stat bonuses, in most cases. They're nothing exciting, but they are fine in the early game. Though, of course, there's nothing stopping you from continuing to only use basic armor sets if that's what you want. They all scale from tier 1 to tier 7, so their base stats will increase just the same as everything else. Don't be fooled by the apparent uselessness of these sets though. There are still interesting things to know about them, and yes, some are better than others. And if you want to try out a basic gear only challenge, you'll definitely want to know these things. Starting with light armor sets, we have leather armor. Human noble rogues start out with this in their origin, and the set bonus is minus 5% fatigue. It's weird that some light armor sets have a fatigue bonus, since there is such a tiny amount of fatigue you get from light armor that it doesn't have a noticeable effect on the mana or stamina cost of your abilities. The only situation this bonus would be useful in is if you were wearing a heavy or massive helmet that gave you a somewhat big penalty to fatigue and wanted to offset that. Even so, it wouldn't do much. For this reason, the leather armor set gets a score of 1. Studded leather armor is what human noble warriors start out with in their origin, and the set bonus is plus 1 defense. Defense bonuses are usually great, but plus 1 is kind of insulting. 2 out of 5, just because defense is slightly more useful. Finally, duster leather. Dwarf commoners start out with this in their origin, and the set bonus is plus 2 armor. Surprisingly, even though this set is made out of crappy little scraps of leather and used by casteless thugs in Orzammar, it's the best set bonus we have in the entire category. Just as a little explanation of how significant 2 points of armor are, a tier 1 light chest piece has an armor score of 4.25, so you're adding almost half of a tier 1 chest piece's worth of armor if you wear the entire set. Even later on in the game, you can find various armor pieces that grant plus 2 or plus 3 to armor, and those bonuses are absolutely considered good. 5 out of 5. This is the best basic light armor set you can get your hands on. People knowledgeable about DAO might be asking themselves, where's the Dalish armor? Well, I don't consider that set to be basic because each Dalish piece actually has stat bonuses on its own, so that one will be compared to special armor sets. Moving on to medium basic armor sets. Chainmail has a set bonus of minus 2.5% fatigue. While you do get more fatigue when wearing medium armor, a tier 1 medium set has 9.75% fatigue, whereas a light set only has 3.5%. Medium armor still has a very manageable fatigue amount. 2 out of 5 because the fatigue reduction starts to make sense here as a bonus. Scale armor has a set bonus of plus 4.5 missile deflection, which makes ranged attacks from bows and crossbows less likely to hit you. There are quite a large number of enemy archers in the game, so missile deflection is always a nice stat. Unfortunately, it's not quite as useful as defense, since defense protects you against melee attacks and has a part to play in avoiding ranged attacks too. The bonus is pretty decent though, so for that I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Finally, we have two sets that weirdly enough have the same set bonus, Splint Mail and Dwarven Medium Armor, both sporting a set bonus of +1 armor. While armor bonuses are great, +1 is not really as good of a bonus, so I'd have to give both of these sets a 3 out of 5. Scale armor might even be slightly better since it could help you avoid certain attacks entirely, but overall they're about on par. Unfortunately, there's no medium basic set that's amazing, but that's generally a design failure because most of the time medium armor feels like an afterthought, generally weaker than both light and heavy armors. Anyway, moving on to heavy basic armor sets. Dwarven Heavy Armor has a set bonus of +1 armor. At this point, wherein the pieces themselves have way more armor, a tier 1 heavy set has 8.5 for reference, the +1 kind of doesn't feel as special anymore, so I have to give the Dwarven heavy set a score of 2 out of 5. Not useless, but not good enough. Heavy Chainmail has a set bonus of -3% fatigue. A tier 1 heavy set has 18% fatigue, so the 3% bonus is not bad, reducing it by a sixth. Overall, it's a pretty decent armor set for warriors early on, so it gets a 4 out of 5. Finally, the ceremonial armor set is weird because it technically does have some stats on its pieces, but it's not really meant as armor that the player will want to wear. The stats from its pieces are -3 armor and +10 mental resistance, and the set bonus is +6 missile deflection. The set is made out of red steel, the tier 5 material. That -3 armor is really bad, and the main reason this set makes it into the basic category is because it mostly exists for show. You could of course try to obtain the full set and go into the Landsmeet wearing this, or use it as part of a challenge run, but otherwise it's just worse than the other sets. I will give this a 2 out of 5 because if you really wanted to, you could argue that you find the missile deflection more valuable than the fatigue or armor bonus of the other two sets, but that's really pushing it. Moving on to massive basic armor sets. Heavy Plate Armor has a set bonus of +7.5 missile deflection. As I mentioned previously, missile deflection is pretty nice and 7.5 is pretty good, so the Heavy Plate gets a score of 4 out of 5. Commander's Plate Armor has a set bonus of +5 willpower. This essentially means +25 stamina or mana. Willpower also adds a bit to your mental resistance, but that's not a very useful stat in general. Honestly, unless for some reason you really need the extra stamina, it's not very good. So this gets a 2 out of 5. The Chevalier Armor set has both a set bonus and a set penalty. The bonus is +3 Constitution, while the penalty is -3 willpower. The Constitution equals to +15 health and a bit of physical resistance. The willpower penalty of course reduces your stamina by 15 and mental resistance by a bit. I don't think the 15 health is worth losing out 15 stamina, especially since we're talking about massive armor here, which has super high fatigue. Even at tier 1, it's already 27% fatigue for a massive set, so your abilities will already cost more stamina to use because of that. I assume this set was meant to be bad because it's Orlesian, I guess. In any case, the Chevalier set gets a score of 1 out of 5. Finally, Dwarven Massive Armor is a bit of a weird one to include here because the chest piece does have a +1 armor bonus, but overall it's small enough and only one bonus on one piece, so I'm including it here unlike the Dalish Armor in the light category. The set bonus is +2 armor, which is strong enough to get the Dwarven Massive set a score of 5 out of 5. Even without the chest pieces +1 armor, this is still amazing since it gives you the most bang for your buck out of all massive basic sets. As a little conclusion to the basic armor sets, I'd say that there's no logical situation in which you'd want to use them instead of a special set or a mishmash of unique items. The separate pieces obviously have no stats other than the massive Dwarven chest piece, and you're only getting a tiny bonus if you equip all 3 pieces. Still, for a challenge playthrough, I hope that this analysis has been useful, and if you're not doing a challenge run, I hope this category has been interesting? Anyway, moving on to the special armor sets. These are kind of all over the place, and frankly I have to put a big caveat at the start to say that in most cases, DLC armor sets are better than most base game sets. Of course, that's the nature of DLC items, they're supposed to feel special so the designers make them overpowered. Starting with light armor, there's only 3 sets. Dalish Leather is the set that Dalish Elves start out with in their origin, and it has bonuses from its pieces of +2 dexterity and +3 defense. and a set bonus of +5 defense. That is a whopping +10 defense, since you also get +2 from the dex bonus, and a plus dex also adds +1 to your melee attack score, +2 to your ranged attack score, +1 physical resistance, and increases the damage of daggers and bows. So you can see how I really couldn't compare the other basic light sets to this. The Dalish set gets a score of 5 out of 5. Even though there's better individual armor pieces out there, the Dalish set is great to have even at a low tier and can absolutely be used without issues for the entire game. Wade's Drakeskin armor has bonuses from its pieces of +35% fire resistance, and the set bonus is -10% fatigue. It's important to mention this is a unique set that is tier 7. As I mentioned before, light armor has such low fatigue anyway. Even at tier 7, it's only 4.02. That -10% bonus is kind of useless. The fire resistance isn't amazing either. Yes, some enemies shoot fire arrows or use flame blast or fireball, and there are a few dragons that breathe fire in the game, but fire resistance isn't all that. Physical attacks are far more plentiful, so bonuses to other defensive stats are just better. This gets a disappointing score of 2 out of 5. Honestly, I'd rather just use a tier 7 Duster leather set for the extra armor. Wade's superior Drakeskin set is a different story. This is also a unique set that is tier 7. The bonuses from its pieces are +4 dexterity and +70% fire resistance, and its set bonuses are -10% fatigue and +5 defense. As before, the fatigue is basically useless, but this time you get a nice +4 bonus to your dex and +5 defense, getting this set on par with the Dalish armor. The Dalish armor does give you in total slightly more defense, but the extra dex from Wade's superior set increases your other stats like attack and the damage of daggers and bows, which makes it better as an offensive armor set for characters using these kinds of weapons. Wade's superior Drakeskin set gets a score of 5 out of 5, tied with the Dalish leather set. This is of course imagining a tier 7 Dalish set to compare it against. Moving on to medium special armor sets, also only 3 of them. The Ancient Elven armor set has bonuses from its pieces of +1 constitution, +2 dexterity, +4 armor, +4% spell resistance, +35 spirit resistance, and the set bonus is +5 defense. The dex, armor, and defense are particularly good, and the spirit resistance is useful in the fight against the Archdemon, which has spirit damage abilities, as well as a few other enemy types like demons and abominations. Unfortunately, it takes a while for you to obtain all the armor pieces since they're scattered throughout the land, and you need a mod on PC because otherwise the boots are unobtainable. I also have to mention that this set has a special visual design, so I'm also giving it style points. Anyway, the Ancient Elven set gets a score of 5 out of 5. Considering the otherwise poor quality of a lot of medium armor pieces, this set is very much appreciated by someone who enjoys the idea of medium armor like I do. Wade's Dragonskin armor set is not really a set you should have because you only get it if you forget to pay Wade when he makes a Drakeskin set. Otherwise, you get a superior set that we'll talk about just after this. Still, to be thorough, I'll mention the stats. It's unique and tier 7. From its pieces you get +35% fire resistance, and the set bonus is -25% fatigue. You only get 12.68% fatigue from the entire set, so the -25% is overkill. And as I said previously, fire res isn't very useful. This gets a score of 2 out of 5. It's not entirely useless, but you better make sure you pay Wade for that first set of Drake scales so that you can get the superior version. Speaking of, Wade's superior Dragonskin armor set is unique and tier 7. The stats from its pieces are +70% fire resistance, +2 combat stamina regen, +25 stamina, and the set bonus is -25% fatigue and +5 defense. I think this is quite a nice set for a strength dexterity rogue or a two-handed damager warrior. You're essentially getting the armor for free in terms of there being no fatigue associated with it, and the bonuses are quite nice. I will say, however, that it's very defensive in nature. There are other armor pieces and sets out there that focus a bit more on your offense, so you might prefer those for a damager. And there's another factor that comes into play. This medium version of the armor Wade can make you out of a dragon scale is not the version that most people will choose. You can choose out of a medium, heavy, or massive set, and most people will choose the heavy set. I'll explain why in a bit. Moving on to special heavy armor sets. The Diligence armor set is my personal favorite heavy armor set in the game, so you'll have to excuse my obvious bias here, though of course I will try to explain why I think it's so good. It's a unique tier 6 armor set, and you need to hunt down the pieces across Ferelden. The bonuses from its pieces are plus 8 armor, plus 6 defense, plus 0.5 combat health regen, and the set bonus is plus 5 willpower. The huge bonus to armor makes this set on par with massive armor. Defense is great as usual. The health regen isn't very relevant unless you're doing something with health regen on your other pieces of gear. The plus 5 willpower equals plus 25 stamina or mana, which you may be interested in as a character who uses a lot of active or sustained abilities. A warrior who's concerned about fatigue penalties will absolutely prefer to wear this over a massive set, since they'll be able to more easily manage their stamina use. Overall, I think it's one of the best base game item sets, so the Diligence set easily gets 5 out of 5. Wade's Heavy Dragon Scale Armor set is not something you should be getting as a player, just like the Dragonskin set, because this would only happen if you forgot to pay Wade when he made your Drakeskin set. Still, it's a unique tier 7 armor. The bonus from its pieces is plus 35% fire resistance, and the set bonus is minus 20% fatigue. The fatigue reduction is quite nice here, reducing the total fatigue of the set from 23.4% to only 3.4%. However, otherwise there's nothing special about this set, so it gets a 2 out of 5. It's better than the basic heavy sets for sure, but it can't stand up against the Diligent set or the superior version of Wade's. Wade's superior Heavy Dragon Scale armor set is probably the best version of Wade's armor you can craft out of the High Dragon Scales. This is for a multitude of reasons, starting with the stats. A unique tier 7 armor, the bonuses from its pieces are plus 70% fire resistance, plus 2 combat stamina regen, plus 25 stamina, and the set bonuses are minus 20% fatigue and plus 5 defense. The stamina regen, stamina, defense, and fatigue reduction are already great and make this armor set one of the best base game armors. However, there is one final trick that makes this set even better. You can replace the chest piece you get from Wade when he crafts you this set with another chest piece called Yvonne the Great Smail, which you can buy from Haren in Wade's smithy after you complete 3 main quests. I'll also rate Yvonne's chest piece separately, but as a quick summary, it has amazing bonuses for what a warrior, tank, or damager wants. Paired with a total plus 1 stamina regen and plus 20% fire res from the gloves and boots and the set bonuses, this set makes your warrior or arcane warrior extremely well protected. For these reasons, this set gets a 5 out of 5 with a special mention that this is like a 5+. The only reason I personally don't like it as much as Diligence is because Yvonne's chest piece is very expensive and can only be obtained late after you've already completed 3 main quests. Plus, I don't really like the reddish hue of the armor. Finally, the special massive armor sets. The Warden Commander armor set is a DLC set whose tier varies between 2 and 7. The bonuses from its pieces are plus 1 armor, plus 0.5 combat stamina regen, plus 15% crit backstab damage, plus 50 stamina, plus 10 physical resistance, plus 10% fire resistance, and the set bonuses are minus 12% fatigue and plus 2 constitution. I think you can already see what I was talking about earlier when I said the DLC items are generally better than most base game items. These stats are great for a damager type warrior. The minus 12% fatigue isn't super impressive, considering the entire set at tier 7 would have 28.35% fatigue, but it's still pretty good. The Warden Commander armor set gets a 4 out of 5. It's great, but I don't think it's overpowered since it stands on equal ground with base game armors like Diligence or Wade's superior heavy sets. Kaelin's armor set is also a DLC set whose tier varies between 5 and 7. The bonuses from its pieces are plus 4 armor, plus 10 mental resistance, plus 15 physical resistance, plus 15% crit backstab damage, plus 20% dodge chance, and the set bonuses are minus 25% fatigue and plus 5 combat health regen. This set I do think is overpowered. In particular, the dodge chance from the boots is insane, and then on top of that you get extra armor, crit damage, reduced fatigue, and even an actually useful amount of health regen. I love using this on warriors of all kinds, whether tanks, damagers, or even arcane warrior mages. The only downside is that it also has a helmet as part of the set, so all 4 armor slots are taken up by this set. Still, Kaelin's armor set is a 5 out of 5. The Juggernaut armor set is a base game tier 6 set. The bonuses from its pieces are plus 20% to all elemental resistances, plus 1 armor, plus 10 mental resistance, and the set bonuses are plus 3 strength and plus 3 constitution. Unlike some of the other base game special sets, you can acquire this one in only one area, the Brazilian Forest, so it's not as big of a treasure hunt. Unfortunately, I don't think the elemental resistances are that amazing. As I said earlier when discussing fire resistance, the truth is that most enemies in the game are physical, meaning that they'll either attack you with a melee weapon or with a bow or crossbow. In that case, elemental resistances do diddly squat. Yes, this set is massive, so it has a higher baseline armor score, but it also has a huge amount of fatigue, 37.5%, and doesn't have any fatigue reduction built in. Not only that, but it also comes with a helmet, so you have to use all 4 armor slots for it. Plus 3 strength is great to increase your damage with melee weapons, but is it really worth having otherwise mediocre armor pieces? It looks very cool and all, but unfortunately I can't recommend using this over the other special massive armors. Certainly it's better than basic armors, and maybe you don't want to use DLC items, but even so you could use the Diligence set or Wade Superior set, either heavy or massive, to much better effect. Because of this, I can't give the Juggernaut set anything higher than 3 out of 5. The Effort Armor set is a base game tier 6 set. The bonuses from its pieces are plus 2 Constitution, plus 15% to healing effects received, plus 1 Strength, plus 1 Armor, and the set bonus is minus 10% Fatigue. It's important to note that you can actually substitute the Effort chest piece with Armor of the Divine Will, and in that case you obviously get 20% spell resistance and minus 5 magic, instead of the plus 15% to healing effects received bonus. The healing effects bonus is unfortunately bugged in the vanilla game, meaning that it doesn't work at all. If you have Dane's Fixes, this is resolved and adds more value, especially for a tank who will be more easily healed by your mage's spells or by health poultices. So in the vanilla game, the Divine Will chest piece is better, though it does come with a significant penalty to magic, which will make healing the character take a bit more effort. You'll likely assemble this set quite late in the game because the pieces are in Orzammar and the Deep Roads. Because of this, it kind of makes the set feel worse, since there's better things you can get earlier like the Diligence or Wade Superior Dragon Scale set, or of course DLC sets. Effort, however, could be slightly better than Juggernaut because of the fatigue reduction, specifically. Obviously it gets less strength and constitution, but you can use your abilities more often. If I were forced to choose between Effort and Juggernaut, I'd usually pick Effort. The only time I'd pick Juggernaut is against a high dragon or some other difficult combat encounter with a lot of elemental damage coming your way. The Effort set gets a 3 out of 5. The Blood Dragon armor set is a DLC armor set at tier 6. There used to be a super overpowered version of it, but it got patched out, so I'm going to rate the nerfed version. The bonuses from its pieces are plus 6 defense, plus 40 health, and the set bonuses are plus 3 armor and plus 1 defense. As far as stats, honestly, it's still pretty good, though it pales in comparison to the initial version, which, yes, was too much. The problem, however, with this nerfed version is that a lot of the time you'll probably prefer using Kaelin's armor, the Warden Commander armor, the Diligence set, or Wade Superior set, because those have more bonuses, or else more useful bonuses for a bunch of different builds. The Blood Dragon set just gives you defense, armor, and health, and of course these are great stats for a tank, but unfortunately there's no fatigue reduction and no other bonuses like stamina regen, dodge chance, or other things that may have pushed this set to be preferred over others. The visual design of this is really cool, but unfortunately the designers nerfed it too hard. And you know, there's an unspoken rule to not nerf player items in a single player game. Come on guys. Unfortunately, this means I have to give the Blood Dragon set 3 out of 5, as much as I'd love to be able to give it more. If you want to use the Blood Dragon set and you're playing on PC, I recommend finding a mod that restores the original version. I will also mention that on PC, the set bonus only requires the chest piece, gloves, and boots, so you can wear a different helmet if you want to. I guess that's something. The Legion of the Dead armor set is a tier 7 base game set that can be found in the Dead Trenches and the Deep Roads. The set consists of the chest piece, gloves, and boots. The helmet and shield aren't required for the set bonus. The bonuses from its pieces are plus 3 willpower and plus 4 attack, and the set bonuses are plus 3 damage and plus 3 constitution. This is a pretty interesting armor set because it's the only one that straight up gives you a bonus to damage. Of course, there are a few armor sets that grant bonuses to strength or dex, which can indirectly increase your damage, but the Legion set is the only one that directly increases damage. The willpower bonus is just plus 15 stamina, which is nice and all, but it doesn't quite stack up against the plus 25 or even plus 50 stamina that we've seen in other sets. The plus 3 constitution is just plus 15 health, which is also nice but not amazing. The plus 4 attack isn't great, especially at the point in the game when you pick this up. The damage bonus is good, so you may be tempted to use this on a two-handed damager, but I'd recommend against it. Because there's no fatigue reduction, you'll have to have a lot of extra stamina on your warrior from accessories and attribute points spent on willpower. If you really like the cool, unique look of the armor, sure, go ahead and use it, but don't expect it to be super good. I'll give the Legion of the Dead set 3 out of 5. Just like the other sets that got a 3, it's serviceable, but it would never be my first or even second pick. The Riverdane armor set is restricted to Logain only, and of course you can only use Logain after the lands meet if you recruit him. It's a tier 6 armor set. The bonus from its pieces is plus 5 strength, plus 5 willpower, plus 1.25 combat stamina regen, and the set bonus is plus 5 willpower. It's not terrible, but in all honesty for a massive set it's not good. It has huge fatigue and no fatigue reduction. Yes, you do get plus 50 stamina from the 10 total willpower, but considering every ability costs more, that's not really enough. It's very nice flavor that Logain has his own armor set, and that it's at least decent considering he's such a late addition to the party, and if you didn't know Alistair leaves, you might have just lost some very good warrior gear as a result of recruiting Logain. I'll rate this a 4 out of 5. It's better than stuff like the Legion of the Dead set, but isn't quite as good as Kaelin's armor set. Wade's Dragonbone Plate armor set is one you shouldn't be getting. Pay Wade for the Drakeskin set, yada yada. It's a tier 7 armor set. The bonus from its pieces is plus 35% fire resistance, and the set bonus is minus 15% fatigue. This version is a joke, and if you accidentally crafted it, reload the save or just sell this for money. Any of the other special sets are better than this. Wade's Dragonbone Plate armor set gets a 1 out of 5. It's just barely better than a basic set. Wade's Superior Dragonbone Plate armor set is of course a different story. It's tier 7, the bonuses from its pieces are plus 70% fire resistance, plus 2 combat stamina regen, plus 25 stamina, and the set bonuses are minus 15% fatigue and plus 5 defense. It's perfectly fine as far as massive armor sets go, but I would personally never choose to craft this over the Superior Heavy set. The Heavy set has significantly lower fatigue, and honestly the extra armor of the Massive set isn't worth it in my opinion, especially because with the Heavy set you can replace the chest piece with the amazing Yvonne the Great's mail, while the Massive version is stuck with a basic chest piece. Wade's Superior Dragonbone Plate set gets a 3 out of 5 for me, though as I've said, I'd never even crafted to begin with. With this, we reach the end of the special armor sets category. DLC items are showing their teeth and pushing for the top spot in most cases, but at least when it comes to armor sets, they do tend to be perhaps a bit more balanced, allowing some base game sets to still shine. I will say though, that unless you're playing on hard or nightmare, and if you're good at the game even then, you don't have to worry about using a slightly subpar armor set. If you like it and want to use it, you can make it work and still manage to complete the game, even on nightmare. After all, you still have your character's attributes, abilities, weapons, accessories, and consumables to make up for any weaker aspects of your armor. This of course applies to the individual armor pieces that I'm going to be looking at next too, but the reason I bring this up now is because I know some of these armor sets look really cool or have interesting lore implications. So even more than certain individual items, players may be drawn to using these, and it's absolutely fine to use them as long as you generally understand how the game's mechanics work. Shameless self-plug here telling you to go watch the Combat Mechanics Guide if you haven't already, because DAO has some weird systems that aren't really explained well to the player. Before we move on to individual pieces, I also want to shout out an interesting mod that you may like to use for DAO which has to do with armor sets. Expanded Item Sets by Darth B. the Man. This mod increases the number of items that have set bonuses either by allowing certain items to act as substitutes for others in sets, or by adding some new sets. All the features and specific items are optional, so you can only add in what you think fits. It's very nice and I think works well to add lore-friendly sets, and especially to allow you to use unique items in more generic sets, like for example the City Elf Adaya's boots with the leather armor set. Or as a nice example of a new lore-friendly set, the Templar item set, allowing you to use Templar armor or Knight Commander's plate in combination with Templar helm or Knight Commander's helm for a bit of extra willpower and spell resistance. If you're interested in giving this mod a go, the link is in the description. Anyway, moving on to judging individual armor pieces. I'm including here both items that aren't part of any set as well as the individual pieces of sets, the ones that have stats at least. If there are any items that don't have any bonus stats, they'd automatically get a 1 out of 5. You can still wear that armor piece for its base armor score, but you'll find that most items with bonuses will be better. The reason I'm mentioning individual items from armor sets is that there's nothing stopping you from mixing and matching items from different sets that are powerful on their own, even if that means you're losing out on the set bonus. Starting with helmets, we get an exciting new category that we didn't have before in sets. Cloth helmets. Yay! Said no one ever, because the cloth helmets in Dragon Age are some of the ugliest things in existence. Still, you may want to get over the disgust and equip one on your mage, so here we go. One thing to note, cloth items don't have a base armor score. The Apprentice Cowl is the simplest cloth helmet and grants +5 mental resistance. Honestly, just sell it. Mental resistance isn't worth it on its own, very few things require mental res, and your mages aren't likely to get targeted in general if you have a tank in the party. Apprentice Cowl gets a 1 out of 5. Useless. Cameo Cowl is a unique mage-restricted helmet that grants +2 Cunning and +0.5 combat health regen. Not really sure who thought to put Cunning on a mage-only helmet, but here we are. Cunning is, by the way, absolutely useless on a mage, unless you really want a bit of extra armor penetration. Mage staves already have a huge armor penetration score for their basic attacks, and even if you think the AP would be useful for an Arcane Warrior's melee weapon, +2 Cunning only gives you about 0.28 AP, so just don't. I guess the health regen might be useful for a Blood Mage, but barely. Cameo Cowl gets a 1 out of 5, with the mention that yes, it is marginally more useful than the Apprentice Cowl. Collective Arming Cowl is a unique mage-restricted helmet that grants +2 Constitution. This one at least gives you +10 health, so you may want to use it on a Blood Mage, especially though health isn't terrible on anyone. It gets a 3 out of 5. Enchanter's Arming Cap is a mage-restricted helmet, not unique, that grants +1 willpower and +10 mental resistance. The +1 willpower equals +5 mana. The mental resistance is useless. I guess 5 mana is better than nothing, but I'm still giving this a 1 out of 5 with the same caveat that it is marginally better than the Apprentice Cowl. Enchanter Cowl is not mage restricted and also not unique. It grants bonuses of +5% to cold, nature, and spirit resistance, and +5 mental resistance. It's pretty useless, I'll be honest. A 5% to an elemental resistance isn't significant enough unless you're pairing it with something else. Even if you can equip this on non-mages, there's no reason to do so. There's better helmets out there. This one also gets a 1 out of 5, while still technically beating out the Apprentice Cowl. First Enchanter's Cowl is a unique helmet that's not mage restricted. It grants +10% dodge chance and +4% spell resistance. This one is actually a great helmet for anyone, but especially a frontline fighter due to the dodge chance. Unfortunately, you can only obtain it right before the final battle, so its usefulness goes down. I guess you can use it in the Awakening expansion and possibly the Golems of Amgarok DLC if you import it in your character's inventory. First Enchanter's Cowl gets a 4 out of 5. It's very powerful, but due to only being used in the final battle, I can't give it a 5. Reinforced Magus Cowl is a unique mage-restricted helmet that grants +2 willpower, +20 mental resistance, and -1 dexterity. This time you're getting a whole 10 mana. Wow. Yeah, no, it's still pretty useless. 1 out of 5, still better than Apprentice Cowl. Finally, the Libertarian's Cowl is a unique mage-restricted helmet that grants +12 defense and +0.25 combat mana regen. This is my personal favorite helmet, despite its looks, because the defense bonus means the mage is more likely to avoid a physical attack if for some reason it comes, and mana regen is always great. However, it's not a super amazing item by any means, so it also only gets a 4 out of 5, tying with First Enchanter's Cowl. Cloth helmets aren't great, I'll be honest. I understand why they exist in the game, but I wish there were more useful ones. Moving on to light helmets. These are helmets that you're usually going to equip rogues with, though some can be useful for mages and warriors too. Armsman's Tensioner grants +6 attack and has the coveted rapid aim property for archers. While these stats are amazing for archers, the downside is that you can only obtain it after completing 3 main quests. For that reason, I'll give it a score of 4 out of 5. Free Scout Arming Cap grants +2 dexterity. This is great for most characters, since it increases your attack, defense, and damage with daggers and bows. Unfortunately, it's locked behind a side quest that requires you to complete all the previous Blackstone Irregulars quests, so that docks some points, ending up at a score of 3 out of 5. Unless you know about this helmet, you're very unlikely to get it, so while it's great, it doesn't stack up well against others that are easier to obtain. Long Runner's Cap grants +0.5 combat stamina regen, and you can get 2 copies of it in the Karta hideout in Orzammar. This is generally great for everyone, including mages for whom the stamina regen turns into mana regen. Whether you need the extra regen to keep up a sustained ability or just want it so that you can use abilities more often, this is a perfect option, 5 out of 5. Owen's remaster work is tier 2 and grants +1 armor, and is only obtained if you said you'd save Elena in Redcliffe, but then didn't find her. Owen will give you this as a reward for trying, at least. It's better than a basic light helmet by a little, but that's it. Still a 1 out of 5 because it doesn't have enough armor to compete with more useful stats. Quicksilver Arming Cap grants +2 cunning, a strong option for cunning-based rogues, and easy to obtain from a merchant in Orzammar. 4 out of 5 because it's not as versatile as some of the other options. Kunari Thickened Cap grants +10 mental resistance. Virtually useless other than for the base armor score, but at least it's free if you kill the bandit leader in Lothering. 1 out of 5 even so. Studded Helmet is pretty basic, but it does grant +3 physical resistance. Physical res is far more useful than mental res because plenty of enemy abilities and spells have effects that can be resisted provided you have a high phys res. 2 out of 5. Phys res is especially useful for warriors to keep them from getting stunned or knocked down, so this is great in the early game when your warriors aren't yet very sturdy. Studded Leather Helm is just slightly worse, granting +2 physical resistance. It's still decent though, so I'll also give it a 2 out of 5. Conspirator's Foil grants +20 mental resistance. I've mentioned this plenty of times, but mental resistance is mostly useless since very few abilities have a mental resistance check, so this helmet gets a 1 out of 5. Finally, the Long Sight grants +5% ranged critical chance. It's looted from the High Dragon, so you'll need better gear and a higher level to beat the dragon and obtain this. I think Armsman's Tensioner is better if you don't have enough rapid aim on other items, but if you do, then the extra ranged crit chance is worth it. 4 out of 5. Light helmets tend to have better stats, and due to their fairly low strength requirements, or dex if you have the Dexterity Light Armors mod, pretty much anyone can equip them. Moving on to medium helmets. Ancient Elven Helm grants +25% spirit resistance and is part of the Ancient Elven armor set. On its own, the helmet is useful against a few enemy types: the Archdemon, Shrieks, Desire Demons, Rage Abominations, Arcane Warriors, Ash Wraiths, Revenants, and Corrupted Spiders. There aren't that many of these demon or undead types for the spirit resistance to be super useful though. Generally, most of these enemies die easily other than the Archdemon and the Revenant. It's a great option for the final battle to have some resistance against the Archdemon's spirit damage abilities, but otherwise the enemies dealing spirit damage aren't that plentiful, so it's very situational. Because of that, it gets a 3 out of 5. Barbarian Helmet grants +2 attack. It's a very simple helmet, and most of the time I wouldn't bother with it, but the attack bonus is at least a little useful, so it gets a 2 out of 5. Camonet's Barbute grants the rapid aim property as well as +2 missile deflection. You can obtain it after completing 3 main quests by buying it in Denerim. Rapid aim is great for archers, but once again, just like with Armsman's Tensioner, it's a shame you only get access to this so late. The missile deflection is also not really that important for archers usually, so this gets a 3 out of 5. Dead Metal Bucket grants +25 mental resistance. Mental res is useless, so this gets a 1 out of 5. Dwarven Helmet grants +2 physical resistance. It's a small amount, but at least it's somewhat useful, so that's a 2 out of 5. Kunari Infantry Helm grants +2 mental resistance. Not only is it useless, but it has the lowest mental resistance bonus you can get on an item. 1 out of 5. Moving on to heavy helmets. Executioner's Helm grants +25 stamina. Extra stamina is often enjoyed by damagers, especially because they like to use their offensive abilities more often, but tanks can also make use of extra stamina obviously. A great but simple helmet that gets a 4 out of 5. Griffin's Helm grants +15% electricity resistance and is obtained very late in the game after the lands meet from the Grey Warden Vault. It's part of the Griffin's Ensemble set together with the Griffin's Beak Battle Axe, but both this helmet and the axe are quite bad. It's a bit better than a basic item since electricity resistance can help you take less damage from a few enemy abilities, so it gets a 2 out of 5. Helm of Hanleith is a DLC item that grants +2 to all attributes and +3 armor. It's basically the best in slot helmet for pretty much any character due to the bonus to all attributes, and a +3 armor makes it one of the best helmets even in terms of armor score. It's extremely unfair to compare to the other helmets, but nonetheless it gets a 5 out of 5. Helm of the Deep is a DLC item that grants +2 constitution and +10 mental and physical resistance. This is a much more balanced item, on par with the best base game helmets. The defensive stats make it particularly nice on a tank warrior. It doesn't have any equip requirements, so you may also be interested in giving this to a blood mage for the extra HP. It gets a 5 out of 5, with the special mention that of course it's not as good as Helm of Hanleith, but then again, literally no other helmet is. Helm of the Red grants +1 dexterity and plus 10% fire resistance, and is obtained if you defend Redcliffe Village without any NPC casualties. The stats are nice, though nothing special, so this gets a 3 out of 5. Proving Helm grants +1 willpower and constitution. It's only tier 1 and +5 health and stamina is frankly not good enough, so this gets a 1 out of 5. Thane Helmet grants +3 defense and is looted super early in the Korcari Wilds. It's a great early helmet and still pretty good even later on if you can't find something better, since the extra defense will help your character be more likely to avoid physical attacks. 3 out of 5. With heavy helmets, you can see that the DLC items are once again the best, while everything else tends to pale in comparison, even though there are a few good base game ones too. They're still better than the medium helmets though. Finally, massive helmets. Bergen's Honor is a collector's edition helm that you can buy in the party camp and which grants +2 armor, +6 attack, and +25 physical resistance. This is a really strong helmet for a tank due to the high armor and phys res, and the attack bonus is always welcome. But since it's a tier 7 massive helmet, it requires 42 strength to equip, so you can only use it if you invest a good amount of points into strength. It gets a score of 4 out of 5 because it's more situationally useful than other helmets. Blood Dragon Plate Helmet grants +10 health. As I mentioned in the armor set section, this set was nerfed far too much, so on the whole it's not that good. You can get +10 health from the +2 constitution from the heavy Helm of the Deep, and also get some extra physical and mental resistance on top. Obviously it's better than a basic helmet if you have the 38 strength required to equip it, but it's not good enough. 2 out of 5. Kaelin's Helm grants +1 armor and +10 mental resistance. Part of Kaelin's armor set, it's worth it, but on its own, not so much. The extra 1 armor isn't amazing compared to other helmets, and mental resistance is useless. 2 out of 5. Corruption grants +5 dexterity, +1 armor, and +75% spirit resistance. It's one of the best base game helmets for sure, but unfortunately you looted literally during the final battle, so you can only use it for the remainder of that. You could of course import it into Awakening or Golems of Amgarak, in which case yes, it would be quite useful to you. Despite its amazing stats, I can't give it above a 3 out of 5 for the uselessness that comes out of obtaining it in the end game. Duty grants +2 constitution and can be found by the dog in the Deep Roads. It's part of the effort set. While you have to buy the Blood Dragon Helm, this one's free, and you also get a bit of physical resistance from the constitution, so it's a bit better. Not good enough though, so it still gets a 2 out of 5. Juggernaut Helm grants +1 armor and +10 mental resistance, exactly like Kaelin's Helm. It's part of the Juggernaut set, but it's just as useless as Kaelin's Helm on its own, so it gets a 2 out of 5. Knight Commander's Helm grants +5 physical resistance. Phys res is useful, but the bonus is quite low, and so it's on the same par as most of the other massive helmets. 2 out of 5. Rock Knocker, on the other hand, grants +25 physical resistance. This is a much more significant bonus. You can obtain it for free as it drops from the Broodmother, or else buy it from Jannar and Orzammar. Gorham also has a copy in Denrim, but only after you complete 3 main quests. I give this helm a solid 3 out of 5. It's good, especially for a tank to help them resist stuns and knockdowns, but not anything super amazing. Standard Bearer's Helm grants +2 mental resistance. Utterly useless. 1 out of 5. The massive helmets have a few great options, but mostly quite subpar ones. I've noticed that unlike other armor pieces that you'll see later on, there aren't as many solid helmet options. Let's talk about chest pieces now, starting with cloth chest pieces. These are mostly used by mages, though there are a few that aren't mage restricted and could technically speaking be used by a warrior or rogue, though unless you're doing something weird like a challenge playthrough, I don't recommend it. As with the cloth helmets, these chest pieces don't have a base armor score. They also don't have a fatigue penalty due to that. Archon robes are not mage restricted and grant +3 armor, +2 spell power, and +0.75 combat health regen. These are alright for a blood mage, earlier in the game potentially, but the spell power bonus is low compared to other robes. You could use this on a Reaver warrior maybe, since they do have an ability that scales with spell power and appreciate health regen, but that armor bonus is really low. 2 out of 5. Apprentice robes grant +1 willpower, aka +5 mana or stamina. The mage character starts out with this in the Circle Mage origin, but quickly gets the mage robes as an upgrade. They aren't mage restricted, but they're really bad. For that tiny of a bonus, you might as well be naked. 1 out of 5. Chastened Robes are not mage restricted and grant +6 defense. You obtain them super early in the Korcari wilds, though you can also buy them from the Dalish camp. Early on in the game, you may prefer to use this over a light or medium chest piece, since the defense bonus may actually help out more to avoid enemy attacks entirely instead of just reducing the damage taken with armor. However, later on it's very hard to maintain a high enough defense score to essentially never get hit, so there does come a point when this chest piece needs to be replaced by something that actually grants armor. Still, a surprisingly decent option for a rogue or warrior in the early game. Obviously useless for mages though. 3 out of 5. First Enchanter Robes grant +3 willpower, +3 magic, and +9 defense. This is a very solid option for mages since the +3 magic increases your spell power, you get 15 mana, and the defense is never bad. The robes aren't mage restricted, but I don't see why you'd wear them on a non-mage. 4 out of 5. Lesser Tevinter Robe grants +1 spell power and +0.25 combat mana regen. You find these very late as part of the Denrim Alienage questline, and the bonuses are so tiny it's laughable. Better than nothing, but barely. 2 out of 5. Mage Robes grant +1 willpower and +1 magic. At least that's a little extra spell power, but it's still bad. 2 out of 5. Morrigan's Robes are Morrigan-only robes that grant +2 magic and +10% cold damage. These are her starter robes, and they're pretty decent, though nothing special. The cold damage is only useful if you unlock more cold damage spells on her. The reason why you'd want to keep these robes is that they allow Morrigan to keep her unique appearance. Otherwise, she reverts to the normal female model, which is quite boring. Due to the unique look, I'll give these a 3 out of 5. Reaper's Vestments are mage restricted and grant +6 constitution, +20% fire resistance, +16% spell resistance, +10% dodge chance, and +12 armor. I think this robe is especially nice on an arcane warrior since it makes them tankier, but otherwise, since it doesn't increase magic, spell power, or mana or health regen, it's not as useful for regular mages, including blood mages, who cast spells and shoot from afar with their staves. 3 out of 5 because they're only useful for one build, at least as far as I can tell. Robe of the Witch is not mage restricted and grants +3 armor, +5% dodge chance, and +10% cold resistance. Again, if you're doing a weird challenge run or really don't want to have any fatigue, you could use this on a rogue, I guess. 2 out of 5 since it's not completely useless. Robes of Avernus are DLC robes that grant +3 armor, +3 willpower, and improve blood magic, meaning that spells cost 25% less health to activate while using blood magic. The bonus doesn't stack with those from Blood Ring or Sash of Forbidden Secrets though, so you really only need this bonus from one source. Other than this special bonus, the other two are quite shitty, so this gets a 2 out of 5. It's just not good enough. Robes of Possession are Morrigan-restricted robes that grant +5 magic, +12 defense, +8% spell resistance, -1 willpower, and +20% cold damage. You can obtain them as part of Morrigan's personal quests, and they're a very nice upgrade for her starter robes while still allowing you to keep Morrigan's unique appearance. 4 out of 5, good stats but not super amazing. Robes of the Gifted grant +6% spell resistance and reduce hostility. The hostility property isn't implemented in the base game, but Dane's Fixes implements it. Still, even with that, this robe is frankly useless. 1 out of 5. Robes of the Magister Lords grants +5 willpower, +10% fire resistance, and +10% cold resistance. The willpower is equal to +25 mana, and the fire and cold res are pretty useless on a mage. No magic or spell power bonuses, no health or mana regen. It's not mage restricted, but these stats aren't great for a non-mage either. 2 out of 5. Senior Enchanter's Robes grant +2 willpower, +2 magic, and +6 defense. When starts out with these robes, they are appropriately shittier than the first Enchanter robes, but still pretty nice for a mage. 3 out of 5. Tevinter Enchanter's Robes are mage restricted and grant +0.5 combat mana regen, +3 spell power, and +10% dodge chance. The mana regen and spell power are good, but the dodge chance is a bit confusing, seeing as in most cases your mage isn't going to be targeted by enemies. That's what tanks are for. But at least 2 out of the 3 bonuses are good for mages, so it gets a 3 out of 5. Tevinter Mage Robes are not mage restricted, but are really only useful for mages despite that. They grant +1 combat mana regen, +4% spell resistance, and +5 spell power. This chess piece is way better than the previous one, the mana regen is double the amount, and the spell power is a lot better too. I think these robes are quietly the best option for a regular mage who wants a lot of mana regen and spell power. Other options will give you more spell power, and of course you could always chug lyrium potions, but I find that to be very non-immersive if I just let my characters chug potion after potion when lyrium is supposed to be a controlled substance that's very hard to obtain. So I'm giving these robes a 5 out of 5. Tevinter robe grants plus 3 spell power and plus 0.5 combat mana or stamina regen. It's essentially the same as the Tevinter enchanter's robes but without the dodge chance, which doesn't make much of a difference for mages. It's not mage restricted, but there isn't much of a reason for a warrior or rogue to be wearing it. 3 out of 5 though, since the stats are useful for mages, at least earlier in the game. Vestments of the Seer is a DLC chest piece that grants plus 9 willpower, plus 6 magic, plus 10 armor, and plus 12% spell resistance. It is mage restricted, which is a shame, because the armor and spell resistance would be nice for a tanky character. The magic and willpower bonuses are very nice for a mage, though I will say that it's disappointing for a DLC mage robe to not have mana regen. Due to this, I'll also give it a 4 out of 5. Unlike other chest pieces, I think robes are nicely balanced, with most options being at least somewhat useful, and the weak robes that exist are more so there for flavor, in the sense that they're meant to be weak in the game world, which I appreciate. Moving on to light chest pieces. There's only a few of these with bonuses, which is a shame because it doesn't feel very fun to equip rogues because of the lack of options. Usually you would equip your rogues with these, although some warriors may appreciate the super low fatigue penalty coupled with good bonuses. Battle Dress of the Provocateur is a DLC item unlocked in the Liliana's Song DLC that grants plus 4 dexterity, plus 5 armor, plus 15% dodge chance, plus 0.5 combat stamina regen, and plus 50 stamina. This is what I consider the best light chest piece for a melee rogue due to the extra stamina to use more of the damaging dual weapon abilities, and the dodge chance helping you avoid enemy attacks since you're on the front lines. 5 out of 5. The Dalish armor grants plus 1 dexterity and is part of the Dalish armor set. As far as more basic items go, this is very nice for the early game, though you could of course use it later on too if you get it at a higher tier. I'll give it a 3 out of 5 due to its potential when combined with the Dalish gloves and boots, and for the fact that it's relatively easy to obtain a bunch of these in the Brazilian forest for free or buy them in the Dalish camp. Shadow of the Empire grants plus 2 strength, plus 2 dexterity, and plus 1 combat stamina regen. It can be purchased in Orzammar, and it's alright but not amazing. Still, if you want to equip all your rogues, it's worth picking this up. A melee rogue in particular will appreciate it since the strength increases their damage, and also allows them to equip higher tier full weapons in their main hand if you want to go for a big weapon plus dagger kind of build. This one gets a 4 out of 5. The Felon's Coat grants plus 6 dexterity, plus 9 defense, plus 4 armor, plus 1 combat stamina regen, and plus 15 physical resistance. You can only obtain this after 3 main quests have been completed though, and it's pretty expensive. Still, it's the best base game light chest piece, and I think it's the best such chest piece for archers due to the higher dex bonus. Though of course it's very useful for melee rogues as well as possibly a more lightly armored and defense-focused tank warrior. Wade's Drakeskin leather armor only grants plus 25% fire resistance, so it's not very useful. Since it's tier 7, at least it has 9 base armor, but I can't give it more than a 2 out of 5. Wade's Superior Drakeskin leather armor grants plus 2 dexterity and plus 50% fire resistance, so it gets a 3 out of 5. It's not as good as Shadow of the Empire or the other two, but it's a nice enough option, especially since you can get Wades to craft it for you essentially for free, other than the 10 gold you spend on the first set so that the Dragon Scale armor is upgraded. While there's only a few light chest pieces with bonuses, they're all quite good. Wade's Drakeskin chest piece is really the only one that doesn't give you much other than being tier 7, and of course the Dalish armor is meant to feel like a slightly elevated basic item, so it's not fair to compare it to the unique chest pieces. Moving on to medium chest pieces. There's even less of these than the light ones. Ancient Elven Armor grants plus 2 dexterity, plus 2 armor, and plus 10% spirit resistance, and is part of the Ancient Elven set. As far as individual armor pieces go, this is a very solid chest piece for either a rogue or a more dex-focused warrior, such as a dual wielder or a weapon and shield tank. However, it's not amazing by any means, so it only gets a 3 out of 5. Shielded Dwarven Armor grants plus 1 constitution and plus 4% spell resistance. It's obtained if you save Velena from the castle in Redcliffe. The bonuses are really too small to be good, but at least it's better than a basic piece. 2 out of 5. Varathorn's armor grants +3 armor, +20% nature resistance, and +25 stamina. The extra armor makes this on par with some of the lower tier heavy chest pieces. The extra stamina is nice for someone who wants to use abilities a lot, and the nature resistance is fairly useful since a lot of enemies deal nature damage with various abilities. A two-handed damager might appreciate this for the lower fatigue and the stamina bonus. 4 out of 5. Wade's Dragonskin armor grants +25% fire resistance, and you shouldn't obtain this, pay Wade. 2 out of 5. Wade's superior Dragonskin armor grants +50% fire resistance, +1 combat stamina regen, and +25 stamina. As far as individual chest pieces go, it's not bad, but it's not the best, so it's actually on par with Varathorn's armor. 4 out of 5. Moving on to heavy chest pieces. Armor of Diligence grants +2 armor and +0.5 combat health regen. It's a very solid piece, and of course it gets better if worn with the gloves and boots as part of the Diligence set. 4 out of 5. Ceremonial armor is part of the ceremonial set, and it's more there for flavor than anything else since it has -3 armor and +10 mental resistance. It's a 1 out of 5 for its stats. Yvonne the Great Smail grants +1 combat health and stamina regen, +6 armor, +10% dodge chance, and +10 missile deflection. You can obtain it after completing 3 main quests by buying it from Heren in Denrim. This is by far the best heavy chest piece, and it's even better since you can wear it as part of Wade's superior heavy dragon scale set for extra bonuses. 5 out of 5. Superior Dwarven Guard armor grants +1 armor and +10 physical resistance, and it's obtained by a dwarf noble character during their origin story. Early on, this is an amazing free heavy chest piece, especially due to the physical res. However, of course it falls off from the mid-game onwards, so it can only get a 3 out of 5. Wade's Heavy Dragon Scale armor grants +25% fire resistance and shouldn't be obtained. Pay Wade. 2 out of 5. Wade's Superior Heavy Dragon Scale armor grants +50% fire resistance, +1 combat stamina regen, and +25 stamina. It's pretty nice, but can't compete with Yvonne's chest piece. 4 out of 5. Moving on to massive chest pieces. Armor of the Divine Will is Templar restricted and grants +20% spell resistance and -5 magic. I never recommend this since you can just get a Templar armor for free during the Broken Circle quest, which has better stats, without a penalty to magic, which affects how well your character is healed by poultices and spells. 2 out of 5 simply because the spell resistance is more useful than just a basic piece, I guess. Armor of the Legion grants +3 willpower and is part of the Legion of the Dead set. The +3 willpower is really shitty though, so unless you're using the entire set, and even then, it's not worth it. 2 out of 5 for the same reason as before, slightly better than a basic item. Armor of the River Dane is Logain restricted and grants +3 strength, +3 willpower, and +1.25 combat stamina regen. Actually, as far as individual massive chest pieces go, this is very good. With the rest of the set it's not amazing, but you could just let Logain retain his chest piece while changing his gloves and boots to something better. 4 out of 5. Blood Dragon Plate grants +6 defense and +30 health. It's not nearly good enough compared to some of the really good massive chest pieces, and even to some of the heavy ones, but it's pretty decent, so it gets a 3 out of 5. Kaelin's Breastplate grants +1 armor and +15 physical resistance. It's part of Kaelin's armor set, but outside of that it's not really worth using on its own. 2 out of 5 since it's better than a basic item. Dwarven Massive Armor grants +1 armor and is part of the Dwarven Massive Armor set. I mentioned it in the basic armor set section, but obviously it doesn't compare to the really good chest pieces. It is better than a strictly basic one, but not by enough to get it an extra point. 1 out of 5. Effort grants +15% to healing effects received, which is completely useless in the vanilla game, since that property isn't implemented. With Dane's fixes, at least it works, but it's still not a very attractive bonus. Unless you're using it with the gloves and boots for the effort set, it's just bad. 1 out of 5 since on its own it might as well be basic, honestly. Juggernaut Plate Armor grants +10% to all elemental resistances. This one is actually a fairly solid piece individually, though only if you know you're going to fight mages or an area with creatures that deal elemental damage of various types, like the demons and abominations in the Circle Tower, for example. Outside of fighting such enemies, it's better to use something with a simpler bonus to armor, defense, health, and so on. 3 out of 5. Knight Commander's Plate grants +5 willpower, +40% spell resistance, and +10 mental resistance. This is a great chest piece to use on a tank when fighting enemy spellcasters, including certain demons or creatures that use mana instead of stamina for their abilities but don't necessarily look like mages. However, because it's very situational, it gets a 3 out of 5 just like the Juggernaut chest piece. Templar armor is a slightly shittier version of the previous chest piece, granting plus 3 willpower, plus 20% spell resistance, and plus 5 mental resistance. But you do get it for free during the Broken Circle quest. Same thing as before, 3 out of 5 due to being situationally useful. Wade's Dragonbone plate armor grants plus 25% fire resistance and shouldn't be obtained. Pay Wade, 2 out of 5. Wade's superior Dragonbone plate armor grants plus 50% fire resistance, plus 1 combat stamina regen, and plus 25 stamina. It's pretty nice and is of course part of the set, but unfortunately you're pretty much always going to choose to craft the heavy set instead. I also find that the stamina and stamina regen are far less useful on a massive chest piece because the item itself has very high fatigue, causing all your abilities to cost more stamina. So I'm giving it a 3 out of 5, barely. Warden Commander armor grants plus 1 armor, plus 0.5 combat stamina regen, plus 15% crit backstab damage, and plus 10 physical resistance. As far as massive chest pieces go, this is the best one for a damager warrior, and it's even better if paired with the rest of the Warden Commander armor set. However, it still doesn't blow me away compared to some of the heavy chest pieces, so it only gets a 4 out of 5. The chest pieces are generally the armor item that gives you the highest armor score, since of course they are bigger than helmets, gloves, or boots. However, the armor score isn't the only thing that counts, because fatigue is a really important thing, especially when you look at heavy and massive chest pieces. And of course, there are so many stats that you can increase with the right chest piece. Rogues have it easy, in a way, since they only have 3 good base game chest pieces: Shadow of the Empire, Felon's Coat, and Wade's Superior Drakeskin. For warriors, it can be trickier to figure out which chest piece or armor set is best suited to your build, since there's so many options. But I'm hoping that by scoring each item like this, you're getting a better understanding of what makes an item generally or situationally good. Moving on to gloves, starting with light gloves because we don't have cloth ones. Angled Strikers grant plus 5% crit backstab damage and are rogue restricted. They're alright, but you can get a better bonus to crit backstab damage from other gloves, so they only get a 2 out of 5. Ashen Gloves grant plus 20% cold damage and are mage restricted. You'd want to use this on a mage who uses cold spells often. However, I'll mention here that cold spells are more so useful for the potential to freeze targets than for the damage they deal, because most enemies in the game aren't weak to cold. In fact, you're way better off focusing on mostly fire and lightning damage if you're to pick an element. Still, this bonus is very nice and works nicely towards the plus 30% damage bonus cap for the element, so they get a 3 out of 5. Backhands grant plus 10% crit backstab damage and are rogue restricted. Better than Angled Strikers, but not the best. 4 out of 5. Black Hand Gauntlets grant plus 20% spirit damage and are mage restricted. Not a lot of spells that deal spirit damage, so you'd have to know which spells exactly are those and focus on them. But spirit damage is fairly rarely resisted, so it's a nice type to use. Not as useful as fire, but better than cold. 4 out of 5. Charged Mitts grant plus 10% electricity damage and are mage restricted. The bonus is small, though you can get the other 20% to get up to the 30% cap from somewhere else. It's better to just use the plus 20% ones, but these will do until you can get those. 3 out of 5. Cinderfell Gauntlets grant plus 20% fire damage and are mage restricted. Fire damage is likely the best element in the game because both Darkspawn and Undead are weak to it, plus spells like Flame Blast and Fireball are very powerful. 5 out of 5. Coarse Cut Gauntlets grant plus 2% melee crit chance and are rogue restricted. Unfortunately, this is quite a small bonus, and there's a couple other gloves that grant more. But you can get this for free either during the Crime Wave side quest or the Trial of Crows side quest. 2 out of 5, decent for a melee rogue until you can get a better bonus to either melee crit chance or crit backstab damage. Dalish Gloves grant plus 1 dexterity and are part of the Dalish armor set. The dex bonus is actually quite nice for anyone, since that means plus 1 defense and some small bonuses to attack and potentially damage too. 3 out of 5, a very nice early pair of gloves to use until you get something more specific to your build. Elementalist's Grasp grants plus 5% to all elemental types of damage and is mage restricted. It's very nice if you have a mage build that uses offensive spells of multiple elements, and is of course best paired with some additional elemental damage bonuses from other sources like your mage staff or accessories. However, you can only obtain this by doing a fairly obscure side quest called Unbound and killing a difficult boss rank enemy. This is the reason why I never recommend these gloves in any of my build guides, because even though I know how to complete Unbound, I don't even bother doing it in like 95% of my playthroughs. I've never found the gloves to be that amazing, since other gear has elemental damage bonuses too. Even if you have the gloves, you may just find it far more useful to increase one element by a larger percentage. So I'm giving these a 2 out of 5. Gloves of Guile grant plus 2.5 armor penetration. They're pretty good for a melee or ranged damager, though I've found through my own research that armor penetration isn't as important as higher damage, crit chance, crit damage, and so on, because most enemies don't have a high enough armor score. Melee rogues already have a high amount of armor penetration from using daggers and likely getting it as a bonus on other pieces of gear, and damager warriors likely want to use heavier armor pieces or a full heavier armor set. Finally, you can only get these during the Landsmeet portion of the game, which is quite late. Because of this, it just gets a 2 out of 5. Imperial Reinforced Gloves grant plus 0.5 armor penetration, which might as well not be there. 1 out of 5. Just use the Dalish gloves instead, the +1 dex is far more useful. Catriel's Grasp grants plus 3% melee critical chance, though you can only obtain it after completing 3 main quests. It's better than the Coarse Cut Gauntlets, but not the best when it comes to crit chance. 3 out of 5. Land of the Lion grants plus 10% nature damage and is mage restricted. There's just 1 or 2 spells that deal nature damage, and most enemies are resistant or immune to nature. So unless you pair this with hexes that reduce enemy resistances, it's not worth it. Some people like to use nature damage combined with hexes against the Archdemon, since out of all of its resistances, nature is the lowest starting one, but I don't think a little extra elemental resistance makes or breaks the fight, especially since you're very likely fighting the Archdemon by doing physical damage too. 1 out of 5. Pocketed Searing Gloves grant plus 10% fire damage and are mage restricted. Since you obtain the better plus 20% gloves just a bit later at the end of the Broken Circle quest, there's not that much point in buying these at the Circle Tower Quartermaster unless you want to equip a second mage with them. Still a good option though, which gets a 3 out of 5. Polar Gauntlets grant plus 10% cold damage and are mage restricted. As I mentioned before, cold spells are more useful for the freeze effect, so the damage isn't all that important. Still a decent enough option if you want it, though do remember that undead are resistant to cold, so try to use fire against them. 2 out of 5. Pushback Strikers grant plus 5% melee crit chance and are rogue restricted. This is the best that you're going to get in terms of melee crit chance, though you do get these gloves potentially quite late during the Dwarven main quest. Since they're really good for melee rogues though, I'll give them a 4 out of 5. Kunari Siege Gauntlets grant plus 1.5 armor penetration and are looted from the High Dragon. Armor penetration isn't actually that powerful as a gear stat since most enemies don't have high armor scores. While they have a lower AP score than the Gloves of Guile, you can get them quite a bit earlier if you manage to take down the High Dragon, so I'll give them the same score, 2 out of 5. Red Jenny Seekers grant plus 15% crit backstab damage and are rogue restricted. These are the best crit backstab damage gloves, and they're very nice for a melee rogue especially, mostly because an archer will much prefer the repeater gloves for the rapid aim. 5 out of 5 though, since they are very good for both rogue archetypes. Repeater gloves are DLC gloves that grant the much needed rapid aim property and plus 1 armor penetration. A must-have item for archers, though you can get away with other rapid aim gear if you want to wear the Red Jenny Seekers instead. 5 out of 5 due to the power of the rapid aim property on these. Silk Weave Gloves grant plus 20% nature damage and are mage restricted. As before, nature damage is basically useless unless you try really hard to make it good by lowering enemy resistances. Just don't, unless you're doing it as a challenge. 1 out of 5. Spirit Hands grant plus 10% spirit damage and are mage restricted. They're a nice little boost for spirit damage spells, though as I mentioned before, you need to look ahead of time to know which spells deal spirit damage so that you mostly focus on those. 3 out of 5. Storm Talons grant plus 20% electricity damage and are mage restricted. They drop as loot from the High Dragon. If you're using lightning spells, it's a nice enough bonus, and it's interesting to note that electricity damage drains the stamina from warrior or rogue enemies. Still don't find it as powerful as fire, but it is quite nice since very few enemies resist electricity. 4 out of 5. Wade's Drakeskin Gloves grant a measly plus 5% fire resistance, so they're not worth using on their own, and the basic Drakeskin set isn't amazing anyway. 1 out of 5, might as well be basic. Wade's superior drakeskin gloves grant +1 dexterity and plus 10% fire resistance. A perfectly fine piece to use on its own, just like the Dalish gloves. The fire res isn't very important. 3 out of 5. Woof, there's a lot of light gloves. Thank God that's over. Moving on to medium gloves, where we have 3 whole items. Ancient Elven gloves grant +2 armor and +4% spell resistance. The extra armor makes them quite good, on par with some mid-tier heavy gloves, and the spell resistance is useful if you're heading into an area with spellcaster enemies. Of course, if used with the rest of the Ancient Elven set, you'd also get the set bonus, though personally a lot of the time I prefer just using the gloves and armor. 4 out of 5. Wade's dragon skin gloves are a mistake because you didn't pay Wade for the first Drakescale set. They grant +5% fire resistance and are a complete joke. 1 out of 5. Wade's superior dragon skin gloves grant +10% fire resistance and +0.5 combat stamina regen, which actually makes them really good gloves if you're looking for stamina regen for a particularly stamina thirsty build. 4 out of 5. Moving on to heavy gloves. Gloves of Diligence grant +4 armor and are part of the Diligence set. However, due to the huge armor bonus, you can wear them on their own and they are absolutely worth it to increase a tanky character's armor. 5 out of 5. Wade's heavy dragon scale gloves are a mistake, we've discussed this before, +5% fire res is a joke. 1 out of 5. Wade's superior heavy dragon scale gloves grant +10% fire resistance and +0.5 combat stamina regen, meaning they're similarly very good for a stamina thirsty build. 4 out of 5. Finally, massive gloves. Armor of the Riverdane gloves grant +1 strength and +1 willpower, and are low gain restricted, part of the Riverdane set. Not great as a set, and not great on their own either. 2 out of 5 purely for the stats being better than nothing. Logain deserves better gloves. Kaelin's gauntlets are DLC gloves that grant +1 armor and +15% crit backstab damage. They're part of Kaelin's armor set, but these ones are actually quite nice on their own due to the extra crit damage. I'd particularly use them on a two-handed damager who has auto-crit abilities like Mighty Blow and Critical Chance, though a warrior archer with high strength could also make use of these for a similar reason, since they have Critical Shot and Arrow of Slaying as auto-crit abilities, and on top of that a higher crit chance too. 5 out of 5. Effort's gloves grant +1 strength and are part of the Effort armor set. On their own, they're really not great, since they already require a high strength to equip, and just +1 strength is lousy. Still, not the worst bonus, so 2 out of 5. Gloves of the Legion grant +4 attack and are part of the Legion of the Dead set. The entire set is pretty shitty, and I wouldn't use the gloves on their own either. Still, bonuses to attack aren't terrible, so 2 out of 5. Juggernaut plate gloves grant +5% to all elemental resistances. Such a tiny amount of resistances doesn't really do much unless you have more of the same on other pieces of gear. Since this is part of the Juggernaut armor set, it's best to use it as part of the set. If we're talking about using this on its own, I'd rather use the previous 2 gloves, so this gets a 1 out of 5. Wade's Dragonbone plate gloves, need I say more? Mistake, 5% fire res, joke, etc, etc, 1 out of 5. Wade's superior Dragonbone plate gloves grant +10% fire resistance and +0.5 combat stamina regen. While the medium and heavy gloves were quite good, the inherently higher fatigue of these gloves makes them worse. 3 out of 5. Warden Commander gloves grant +10% fire resistance and are part of the Warden Commander armor set. Unfortunately, on their own they're just worse than Wade's superior gloves, so that's a 2 out of 5. Better than nothing, but not by much. Finally, we're in the home stretch. Just boots to talk about. Remind me, why am I doing this again? Starting with light boots, we have a lot of them, just like with the gloves. Adaya's boots reduce hostility, though of course that's not implemented in the base game, so it's basically nothing. Even with Dane's fixes, these don't have any other bonuses, so they're not great. A city elf character gets these as a gift during the origin story though, so of course they're not going to be overpowered. 2 out of 5 due to potentially being slightly useful with Dane's fixes, and for the flavor. Antivan leather boots grant +4% spell resistance. These are a gift you can get for Zevran, which then turn into a wearable pair of boots, but the bonus is barely there. Spell resistance is nice of course, but you usually want it on a tanky frontline character who is likely wearing heavy or massive armor. This 4% on light boots might as well not be there. 2 out of 5 since technically it's better than nothing, and also for the flavor of a gift item turning into an equipable one. Bard's dancing shoes grant +6 defense and reduce hostility. Same thing as before with the hostility reduction thing, but the defense bonus is solid. They are quite expensive though, 10 gold, so not necessarily worth that price. 3 out of 5. Dalish boots grant +3 defense and are part of the Dalish armor set. Defense is great of course, and you can find various Dalish armor pieces in the Brazilian forest for free, so that's why I'm scoring these with 3 out of 5 despite having less defense than the previous boots. Dagon's boots grant +2 constitution, which is surprisingly nice for a pair of light boots actually. You might want to give these to a blood mage, but in the early game that +10 health may come in handy for anyone. 4 out of 5. Enchanter's footing grant +6 defense and are mage restricted. You can get a pair for free in the Korkari Wilds or purchase a pair from the Ostagar Quartermaster. While defense is good, mages don't care about it as much as warriors or rogues. Still, a nice enough bonus, 2 out of 5. Fade Striders grant +1 magic and are mage restricted. A mage protagonist can get these during the Circle Mage origin. These are the only boots that help you out offensively as a mage, so they're actually pretty nice because of that. 3 out of 5 though, because the bonus is so small, and you only get them in the origin story. Imperial Weavers grant +10% dodge chance and are mage restricted. Once again, mages don't usually care for these defensive stats since you should have a tank in your party to keep attackers off of your squishier allies, but maybe as part of a challenge run these may come in handy. 3 out of 5. The Lion's Paw are DLC boots that grant +1 armor, +10% dodge chance, and +10 missile deflection. These are some of the best defensive boots, which makes sense, it's a DLC item. 5 out of 5. Magus War Boots grant +12 defense and are mage restricted. Rogues and tank warriors are salivating at these boots, but unfortunately most mages don't really care. 3 out of 5 simply because the bonus is really big. Silverhammer's Evaders grant +10 missile deflection. They're fine, though defense is strictly better because it relates to both melee and ranged attacks. 2 out of 5. Silverhammer's Tackmasters grant +2 dexterity. Now we're talking. Rogues will love these boots, though even dual-wielding or weapon and shield warriors could make use of them unless they're keen on using a heavier set. 5 out of 5. Can't go wrong with strong attribute bonuses. Wade's Drakeskin boots grant +5% fire resistance. Might as well not be anything. 1 out of 5. Wade's Superior Drakeskin boots grant +1 dexterity and +10% fire resistance. Always nice to see dex bonuses, though Silverhammer's Tackmasters are better. 4 out of 5. Thankfully, there aren't quite as many light boot options as there are for gloves. Not a lot of amazing options, but a lot of solid ones. Moving on to medium boots. Ancient Elven boots grant +1 constitution and are part of the Ancient Elven armor set. The +1 constitution is very disappointing considering this is supposed to be cool Ancient Elven gear. For the sheer disappointment, 1 out of 5, though of course technically speaking they're better than basic tier 4 medium boots. Kadash Stompers are DLC boots that grant +2 dexterity, +2 armor, +2% ranged and melee crit chance, and increase hostility. They're quite good for rogues, though dual-wielding or weapon and shield warriors may also be interested in this, particularly tank warriors who may appreciate the increased hostility. Of course, this property only works if you have Dane's Fixes, but if you do, it's nice for tanking. 4 out of 5. Wade's Dragon Skin boots are a mistake, 5% fire res as a joke, blah blah. 1 out of 5. Wade's Superior Dragon Skin boots grant +0.5 combat stamina regen and +10% fire resistance. For stamina-thirsty builds, and by that I mean builds that need a lot of stamina or mana regen, this could be a nice option together with the gloves that have the same +0.5 regen bonus. 3 out of 5. Moving on to heavy boots. Boots of Diligence grant +6 defense and +2 armor and are part of the Diligence armor set. Even on their own though, these boots are great. The extra armor puts them on par with massive boots. 5 out of 5. Wade's Heavy Dragon Scale boots. You know the drill. 1 out of 5. Wade's Superior Heavy Dragon Scale boots grant +10% fire resistance and +0.5 combat stamina regen. Just like with the medium version, these can be good for builds looking for more stamina or mana regen, if your mage stamina or stamina regen bonuses get converted to mana. 3 out of 5. Finally, the end is nigh. Massive boots time. Armor of the Riverdane boots grant +1 strength and +1 willpower and are low gain restricted, part of his unique set. Not a terrible bonus, but not great either. Way better to switch his boots out with something else. 2 out of 5. Kaelin's Greaves are DLC boots that grant +1 armor and a huge +20% dodge chance. They're of course part of Kaelin's armor set, but even on their own they're amazing to use on any warrior due to that high dodge chance. 5 out of 5. Effort's boots grant +1 armor and are part of the Effort armor set. That's it, not really that amazing considering that the heavy boots of diligence still end up having higher armor than these. 2 out of 5. Juggernaut plate boots grant +5% to all elemental resistances and are part of the Juggernaut plate armor set. As I mentioned when I scored the gloves, this tiny bonus isn't good enough on its own and needs more elemental resistances to make a difference. 1 out of 5. At least if you use Effort's boots you have a bit of extra armor. Wade's Dragonbone plate boots, you know the drill, 1 out of 5. Wade's superior Dragonbone plate boots grant +10% fire resistance and +0.5 combat stamina regen. Just like with the gloves, I have to give these slightly less than the medium and heavy boots because of the inherently higher fatigue penalty, 2 out of 5. They're still usable of course, but the medium or heavy versions are better, and if you want a higher armor score, just go with the Boots of Diligence or Kaelin's Greaves. Warden Commander boots are DLC boots that grant +50 stamina and are part of the Warden Commander armor set. The set itself is good, but the boots are surprisingly nice. 50 stamina from a single piece of gear is great, and these boots will be very nice on a two-handed damager warrior especially, even if you decide to use some other items for the gloves and chest piece instead of the whole set. 4 out of 5, because tank warriors don't really care as much for this. With this, we reach the end of my ranking or scoring of all armors in Dragon Age Origins. 15,000 words later, I have no clue what I was thinking when I decided this was a good idea for a video, so I really hope someone watched this whole thing, even if just out of morbid curiosity. If you did watch until the end, thank you. I really appreciate it. This kind of stuff is what I do for fun when the urge to do intensive research on a special interest hits. It's just that usually my notes are more rambling about how I change each and every item in a theoretical item overhaul mod that I one day want to create for DAO. Anyway, if you have any thoughts of your own on some of these armor pieces or sets, do share them. Maybe I scored something much lower than you expected. If so, let me know how that item has felt more powerful in your playthroughs. Obviously, I'm only one person, and these scores are entirely subjective, coming from my many playthroughs of DAO over more than 15 years. I have my own preferred playstyles and builds though, so despite my experience with the game, that doesn't mean I know everything. So I'm curious to hear if there's something I might have missed about one or more of these armor items. And before you ask, yes, a weapon ranking video will come, so will an accessory ranking video. Because apparently I love typing and then speaking over 15,000 words into a microphone, as long as it's about my all-time favorite game. In any case, if you're looking forward to more videos about Dragon Age and other games I like, do remember to subscribe, and leave a like and comment while you're at it too. They really help. This has been B-Tier Mutineer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.